guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow, and I am back with an all-new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil psychic energy read into Sir Isaac Newton. We are not just going to be exploring his contributions and innovations in the 3D material world, but we are also going to be exploring his gifts and abilities and how they interplayed with his contributions. And we're going to be concluding the video with a very insightful, energetic conversation with him. This and so much more. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around. Now, because Isaac Newton is a notable historical figure and he did make a number of huge contributions to the 3D material world, I'm going to start by sharing some information into who he was and what his contributions were. However, whereas in the past I would acquire all of my information about a topic or a subject's Wikipedia page, I am going to share with you that I have personally found Wikipedia to be severely lacking in the way scientific, mathematical, or even psychological concepts are relayed, because I do not find it to be understandable or even approachable. So half of the material on Isaac Newton was acquired off of his Wikipedia page, and then the other half was a good old-fashioned Google search, because the language and terminology on Google was a lot more palatable and understandable in terms of what his actual contributions were. Now, I'm also going to say, before we dive into anything, it's a little confusing because there's two different birthdays that were listed for him. And if you're thinking, how could that be? It's not because they didn't have good records keeping at that time, so they didn't know what his actual birthday was. No. I'm going to explain to you, after I do the 3D information share on him, why there are two different birthdays listed for him. Okay? So here we go. Sir Isaac Newton, who was either born on December 25th or January 4th, 1643, and who had crossed out of his body on March 31st, 1727, was an English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, alchemist, theologist, and author. So he was like the OG multi-hyphenate. Take that, J-Lo. He was known for his groundbreaking contributions in science, especially in physics and mathematics, and his most notable contributions include, but are not limited to, the law of motion, which is the foundation of classical mechanics, as it explains how objects move and interact with one another, as well as his theory of gravity, which describes how every particle of matter in the universe is attracted to other particles. And he co-developed calculus, which is a branch of math essential to understanding change and motion. He also made contributions and advancements with telescopes, as he developed the reflecting telescope, which used mirrors to provide a clearer image of that object that is far away and that one would seek to see more clearly. These innovations revolutionized the world and laid the groundwork for modern-day science. Newton served 2 brief terms as a member of Parliament, and he was knighted by Queen Anne in 1705. He was described as an exceptionally organized person when it came to note-taking, because his notes were alphabetized by topic. He did not marry, and it is widely believed that he had died a virgin. In addition to that, he had suffered a nervous breakdown around 1693, and while he was known to be modest about his achievements, he was also competitive and, on occasion, could hold grudges against his intellectual rivals. Now, what is this controversy surrounding his birthday? Why is it either December 25th or January 4th? That is because, as I have shared with you guys on more than one occasion, it is my personal belief that time as we know it is a man-made construct. But that's not because time's not real, and that's not because time doesn't, in fact, kind of tick by. It does. It's just to say that if time can be added, whether it's one single solo hour, like with daylight savings time, or if it's more substantial, like many, many months that are added or subtracted from the calendar, that kind of supports the theory that time is a man-made construct. What does that have to do with Sir Isaac Newton? That is because the Gregorian calendar had not been adopted in England. So according to the Julian calendar, he was born on December 25th. But according to the Gregorian calendar, his birthday would have been on January 4th. Now, until I sat down to look into him on Wikipedia, it was only my understanding that his birthday was in fact on January 4th. And the reason that I know that is because that's my birthday. It's many hundreds of years apart, but I knew that because maybe you're like me and you're into astrology, and if you share a birthday with somebody notable, you would kind of like remember that and retain it, as I did, as it pertains to Sir Isaac Newton. But I did share his two separate and distinct different supposed birthdays because first and foremost, I thought it was interesting, but also because if in case you are interested in him and you are inspired to sit down and do further supplemental research into him, you may actually discover as well there are two supposed and separate and distinct birthdays for him that are 10 days apart. So that concludes the 3D information share into Sir Isaac Newton, and we are now going to be getting into the very insightful, energetic read into him. So here we go. As soon as I connected to Isaac Newton's energy, he was shown to me as being fantastically gifted. No surprise there, because as I'm sharing with you guys, for every highly intelligent person, it's usually because there is some interlay between their gifts and abilities and their intellect as well. And it was no different for Sir Isaac Newton, because he was fantastically fucking gifted. He was clairsentient. That is the gift of clear feeling, which resides in a person's abdomen. And as such, he could feel not only the energy of a location and also the people around him, but in particular cases as well, he could feel the energy of a moment and its significance. Because as the story goes, one fine day he was sitting under a tree and an apple fell. And in that moment, it occurred to him, fruit always fell down. But it wasn't just fruit. If he knocked something off of his desk, it would also fall down. So it occurred to him there must be some force that would bring it down, and thus the theory of gravity was born. But while others may have noticed this same phenomenon, it was not profound to them as it was to Isaac. Because in that moment, he had a realization that this felt incredibly significant and to pay attention to it. Because any time he would discover something that was incredibly notable, his skin tingled and it felt as if there was an electric current that ran over his skin. And the world seemed to go quiet in that very moment as well, as in he would develop tunnel vision. His body would have a very strong physical response and reaction when something notable would occur around him that caused him to kind of like tune in and pay attention. And that was what led to him experiencing this so-called tunnel vision. So in that moment, when the apple supposedly fell from the tree and when he developed his theory of gravity, the world seemed to have gone quiet, and even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping, and he had become singularly focused on that one apple sitting on the ground because it had fallen from the tree. He focused singularly and solely on the fruit, on the ground, and the knowledge that without any evidence, this was something truly momentous and significant. Because in addition to being clairsentient and having the gift of clear feeling, Isaac Newton was also claircognizant, which is the gift of clear knowledge. And it's when a person can know something without having any evidence to support the inner knowing that they have, as it was for Isaac Newton. As in, he just knew things without evidence of that knowing, and his discovery of the theory of gravity was one such moment and very clear example of his claircognizance. But his giftedness would mean nothing, nor would it have gone anywhere if he did not trust it. And that's where his gifts work together to support him. Because when he would discover something incredibly notable and momentous, his clear cognizance was activated by something. As in, he would just kind of know in that moment, this is really important. Trust it, pay attention to the inner knowing that this is important. That would then activate something in him, and then his clairsentience would kick in, further directing him to pay attention to this. Whatever this was, his gifts and abilities worked hand in hand with his observation skills. Because again, he might notice something that countless other people would have noticed before, such as something falls down, it's falling down, right? The apple didn't float off into space, it fell down onto the ground. There could have been countless other people that also would notice that. But for Isaac Newton, in that moment, he was like activated. He noticed it, he was observant of it, his clear cognizance would kick in, which would direct him to say, hey, this is really important, pay attention to it, which would then further kick off his clairsentience, further activating him to not only pay attention to it, but to trust it as well. Because he wasn't just seeing things, he wasn't just very observant, he also felt when something was really momentous and important. And he would feel it in his gut. He would have like that instinctual gut feeling. That is what caused him to develop tunnel visions in those moments where he would see nothing else. So, if the story of how he came to develop the theory of gravity is true, did the birds really stop chirping? Probably not. But they seemed to go quiet because he was so singularly focused on the fruit, and that his conscious mind would just tune everything else out. Now, in addition to being incredibly gifted in terms of clear cognizance and his clairsentience, he was also shown to me as being incredibly in tune with organic elements, which is probably also why, if the story of the fruit falling down and that really like capturing his attention would also be why it was so momentous to him, because he was so in tune with organic elements, and a apple falling off of a tree is just about as organic as it can get. So he was incredibly in tune with organic elements, and it is like they came alive around him. And he was shown to me as having been a natural green thumb, as in keeping plants alive and taking care of plants, because he could almost intuit the needs of the plants, such as how much sun or water they needed to not only survive, but to thrive. And because of this, he also would have been an excellent healer, as he could further intuit not just the needs of organic elements around him, but also the needs of people as well, because that's how his clairsentience functioned. He could feel not only the energy of his environment, but the needs of his environment as well, not just the energy of it. Now, I'm also going to say this is probably going to support the theory that he might have actually had crossed over a virgin, because I think he was so highly sensitive to the energy around him that if the energy of a supposed partner that could have been either for marriage or, relational purposes, I think because he was so highly sensitive to the energy around him, it also led to him being incredibly discerning and in him not wanting to compromise his own personal and internal energy. Now, while all of this was going on and I was looking into the energy all around him, he also made his presence known to me. And the way that he had come in is exactly the way his image is drawn and shared on the internet. And in addition to that, the garb or the clothing that he was wearing was exactly the clothing that he would have worn back then as well. So he makes his presence known to me, appearing as he did in that life and wearing the clothing that he had worn in that life. And he kind of stands off on the side and he is smirking at me. It's a friendly kind of a smile, but it's also kind of bordering on a little bit flirty, which I found to be very notable. So while he's kind of hanging off to the side and he makes his presence known to me, I ask if there's anything that he wanted to share with me. Because he gave me carte blanche to look into his energy, but once a subject gives me permission to look into their energy, they don't always come in and kind of like hang around with me. So the fact that he did kind of led me to believe maybe he had something he wanted to share. So I asked him, Sir Isaac Newton, is there anything that you want to share with me? And he was quiet for a moment as he looks around me and he looks at my energy and as he assesses me. And is this not so typical of like a clairsentient person? Especially if they're in tune to their gifts and ability and their clairsentience, of how they're going to be discerning about the energy of other people. So he's just kind of quiet, looking at me, looking around me, and assessing me. And he tells me that he is doing so because there are those that will go to people like him on the other side and others that are similar to him. And they will try to get them to talk and to share secrets so those people that are going to them that are alive can then claim the information that was shared with them as their own inventions. So Sir Isaac Newton has learned to be discerning in who he has chosen to allow to come in and to speak to him. And he also shared with me that sometimes him and people like him, they sometimes cross over before their work is done, or before they could finish seeing it through, or specifically, because they are shown things, but what is shown to them is something that they could not act on. So, for example, one could say that somebody that had a scientific or mathematical mind might be shown an electric battery for a car. But if this was shown to them prior to the existence of cars, they would not have the context for understanding what this rechargeable battery could be used for. So that's why he's saying there are sometimes those that have crossed over and their work was not done because they could have been shown something like this. And even if they would have had the know-how, they wouldn't have the context or the understanding of how to apply it. And he had also told me that my analogy is accurate, as in one person accessing their gifts and abilities is like turning a faucet on. And when they welcome it in, they can receive things that they do not yet understand or is not timeline appropriate. Thus, they cannot do anything with the information that they receive. So now this person is on the other side with all of these fantastic scientific contributions that never came to be in the world. That is why there are people that are alive that can go to them and try to poach them to acquire information off of them, so that way they can then pass that off as their own inventions and discoveries. And he had said to me that depending on a person who has crossed over's level of attachment, the information can die with them. And they can choose not to whisper it into the ears of others who can then take it and run with it. So there are a great number of many people on the other side who do have inventions or know-how, and that people will attempt to make contact with them. So yeah, he was a little bit weary of me when I had first come into him, which led to him being discerning and looking into me and looking all around me to see if I was one such person that would want to connect to him to poach information from him. But he concluded I was not there because I am not an inventor, nor a wannabe inventor, and I certainly was not there to try to seek information from him and to strike it rich. So I said to him, if I'm not that kind of person, what am I? And he tells me that I am a truth seeker and a truth speaker. So I asked him, has he encountered a lot of truth seekers and truth speakers, or is it mostly people that are trying to acquire information from him? And he tells me no. He is mostly forgotten to history, and not many people come seeking to connect with him, like they do to former presidents. Because he's on the other side, not just with other scientific people, but former presidents as well. And he sees that the energy readers are mostly trying to connect with the former presidents. And he says he understands it, and he is not offended by it, because scientists and inventors do not have the same razzle-dazzle and appeal as presidents do. And he has conceded with me that even on the other side, he himself has sought out to connect with former presidents. But it is not because of their status, but only because of their minds, and him, as he self-identifies as a highly intellectual soul, does love to congregate together with other highly intellectual souls and discuss the so-called secrets of the universe as they are now privy to them. So, since he started to talk about the so-called secrets of the universe, I asked him if there are any that he can share with me. As in, are there any secrets of the universe that took him by surprise, that were really big and really notable? And he tells me yes. First and foremost, how vast the universe is. Second, how magical the universe is. And then how in awe he is of God for creating all of it. And that him and the other souls on the other side marvel at God's wisdom to create the world as he did, and how seamlessly things were created to work. And also that if man could just get out of our own way, because we make it so unnecessarily hard for ourselves, if we could just calm down a little bit, we could maybe see all of that as well. But also he shared with me that he cannot imagine living in the world today as we do, because he can see the energy. And he specifically noted that the energy is frenetic. There's a constant bombardment of stimuli, and he would imagine that living in the world today would be far too much for him. That is why he actually has not reincarnated since his lifetime as Sir Isaac Newton. So that's first and foremost why he came into me dressed as Sir Isaac Newton. Because if a soul has had a great number of various different lifetimes, when I'm connecting to, let's say, their Akashic records to look into them, I could be connecting to like the soul's essence. But with him, because there's so much notable information about him and the way in which he appeared in the world and his contributions, it's like he just came in as Sir Isaac Newton to me. Which first and foremost clued me into the fact that he has not reincarnated since then. So I asked him, is that one of the reasons that he has decided not to come back? Is it because the energy is so frenetic? Is it because of the fact there's so much stimulation? And he tells me no. It is because of the fact that he can not imagine coming back and having his memory wiped. Because yes, every time we reincarnate, our memory is wiped in between every single lifetime. So he could not imagine coming back and having his memory wiped. He could not imagine going from having access to all the knowledge in the world and at his fingertips and completely in that moment and instantaneous to having none. That the very thought of it lacks appeal to him. But despite the fact that he has not reincarnated, he also shared that he does respect and admire us. But being the intellectual that he is, he cannot come back, or at least he does not want to come back, without having access to it all. And even though I know the answer to the question that I was about to ask him, I decide to ask it to him anyway to see what he will say. So I ask him, okay, you have made the decision not to reincarnate in hundreds of years. Does that mean that there is no soul or entity on the other side that is pushing souls into bodies and forcing them or maybe encouraging them to come back and to have another go? And he looks at me incredulously and he tells me it is simply not like that on the other side. There is no stress. There is no pressure. There is no anxiety. There is no fear. There is nothing but love and knowledge and God and bliss on the other side. And he also shared with me there are always reunifications with family members. And even if it is not one of your own, it is always something that is beautiful to see. Because he didn't marry, he didn't have kids, so he didn't have future generations that were going to be crossing over that he could then greet as they crossed over. So he's saying, even if it's not your own family, your own future generations that you are getting to greet when they cross over onto the other side and welcome them to the divine realm, it's beautiful just as an observer to get to see that for the other souls that are on the other side. So I ask him then, because I'm curious, and I'm like, okay, so there's no entity that's just, forcing souls into bodies. It's not super aggressive like that. There's no milk cartons containing pictures of souls saying, if seen, please contact or return back to their home planet. So because there are so many souls that are being born on the earth plane and there ain't nobody that's forcing them into bodies, where are all of these souls coming from? And he shared with me that they are either the souls of soldiers and warriors, which I thought was really interesting, whose lives were cut short. Thus, they make the choice to continue to come back again and again and again, as their soul is trying to get the last bits of lives that were previously cut short. So that's why they choose to come back again and again and again, because they might have a really, really notable life, previous life that was cut short. And therefore, they make the decision to keep coming back because it's like, I just want to get every last bit and lick of life that I can get before my soul chooses to graduate from the earth plane and move on. Or, he said, it is also brave souls who just agree to come back again and again. And he glances at me and he says, while winking, but clearly that was not him, because he's been sitting it out for many hundreds of years. That concludes the very interesting and insightful energetic conversation and behind the veil energy read into Sir Isaac Newton and his gifts and abilities. I hope that you have found this video to be as interesting and insightful as I myself thought it to be. If you did, please comment down below and let me know. And this is your reminder until next time to stay in that high vibration.